Welcome back to Fast Politics, Justin Wolfers.
Hey, Molly!
Um, so the great news for the Trump administration is when the government is shut down, you don't get the numbers, right?
Just like how we solved COVID.
So explain.
No numbers, no problems.
But he had already, before shutting down, in Trump's defense, before shutting down the government, he had fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
He made his position on data very clear. He's against it.
Yeah,
He also has a very strong position on truth.
that's right.
Optional.
He likes truthiness.
Yep. In small doses and only occasionally.
Yes. At this point, does the government give us public data still? Not really,
Not,
or yes, or talk us through it?
it's a very sad day. So I'm going to make this personal, if I may, Molly.
Please,
I've been a
please.
nerd for a very long time. When I
I
left
believe
college,
it.
my first ever job was at the Reserve Bank of Australia. And when you have like the Fed, and when you get a job as a baby economist, they give you one tiny sliver of the economy to look after. And my job was the jobs report. And so even as a little baby economist, I would wake up
In a
once a
tiny,
month
tiny country.
in a magnificent and beautiful country, um, with a functional democracy and a
Which you
well-functioning economy,
which you don't live in anymore.
which I have family in and think about during an Ann Arbor winter. So my job was like, it would be jobs day, and I would wake up excited for jobs day, even as a 22-year-old. And then I moved to America and I did my PhD, and you forget about the real world for a little while. And then my better half, Betsy Stevenson, became the chief economist at the Department of Labor. And so it became this thing. The first Friday of every month was jobs day, and she had to get in early and brief the labor secretary and talk to the media and crunch the numbers for what was then the first Obama administration. And so jobs day was such a big day in our household. And then I was writing for the New York Times, and I used to write about the jobs numbers, and it was all very exciting. And it stayed it's just a regular part of our monthly life ever since, to the point that I literally our nanny would walk in and say, "Oh, it's a jobs day today. How are you feeling about the economy?" Um, and today I woke up, and it's the first Friday of the month, and there was an enormous void in my life. The sense of checking in on the workers and seeing how they're doing, of hoping that the economy is moving forward and producing more for more of us, of wondering what's next, of thinking about policies that could make a difference. I did none of that. I sat in a dark room staring at the corner, rocking backward and forward, crying just one solitary tear down my
So
cheek.
talk us through this. We don't have the government data, but we do have some private data. Does that fill the void or
Nope.
does it not?
It's
And
a
why
it's
not?
a it's sorta like, when mom and dad get divorced and then mom starts dating a new guy, but she's not really sure that he's gonna be around for very long, and maybe they've been dating 2 months and he takes you out to the zoo? That is the ADP job report. The ADP job report is not something well loved, has no particular track record, is not particularly reliable, and when you need it, you don't know if it'll always be there for you. So, no, we don't. There's gonna be a lot of press attention around the ADP job report, and it came in yesterday, or the day before. It was not as bad as the past few have been, but still, the important thing is not the comparison with, "Are you as bad as last month?" but, "Are you good or bad?" And it was unequivocally pointing to a weak economy, but I don't want anyone to place much stock in it. It is a very unreliable indicator. So the truth is we're all alone in the dark right now. I hope this doesn't sound like I'm talking about my childhood.
So I need you to sort of pull back from the jobs report
Whoa.
into what you think so we have a federal government that's pretty hostile, that's A, the longest shutdown ever,
Yep.
B, pretty hostile to facts, reason, and truth. So how do you figure out where the economy is knowing those 2 things?
Okay, so the good news, then the bad news. The good news is that government data is not the only data that we have. I did warn you a moment ago that private sector data about the state of the labor market is not as good as government data, and that's absolutely stunningly true. So we have lost some very important things. There do exist many other data sets. For instance, the Federal Reserve, which is not affected by the shutdown, collects industrial production, and so we know how much stuff is coming out of factories. We're not going to be getting GDP data, but we are gonna continue to see surveys of of companies telling us how they're doing. We have all sorts of things about our daily lives are measured in all sorts of ways. We know restaurant reservations through Open Table, and we got a lot of practice of this during the pandemic when a lot of our normal ways of thinking about the economy were broken. What are some creative ways? So
Right.
the good news is we're not purely in the dark. The bad news is it's pretty damn foggy, which is it's going to be very hard to have any great sense of what's going on. That really, really matters right now. Why right now? Because it's possible, but by no means certain that we're at a turning point. It's possible that remember we've been talking about tariffs for 8 months, and I know I've
Yeah.
bored everyone on this, but
No.
actually Trump has only really truly imposed them a couple of months ago. And so if they're going to have an effect, it would be any day now. We are seeing some hints that the economy is slowed right off, not just because of tariffs, by the way, but also we've had a huge shock to immigration. And new people create new stuff. And so that's something that's really going to be missing as well. Those are two enormous shocks that are hitting the economy right now. And we do know enough to know that the economy was slowing. And the question is, are we slowing to comfortable or are we slowing into a recession? And we actually have no way of knowing that right now, which is a very, very uncomfortable place to be in.
Yeah, that does not sound good. And then the other question, which, people will be listening to this podcast on Saturday morning, and we will be in the middle of what Sean Duffy lovingly refers to as airplane Armageddon, where they basically just slow down air traffic because vibes. So that seems like it could have larger consequences to the economy.
Molly, you usually bring me in for the stuff that you feel less confident on, and
Yeah.
that's usually macroeconomics. You feel terrific on finance, and when it comes to fashion, wow, and politics for sure. And
Yeah.
a lovely piece on gender, I thought the other day in the New York Times. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you want to talk about macroeconomics, and the truth is that the government shutdown is going to be a small impact in terms of its overall macro stuff, right? So the headlines aren't going to change a lot. That's position one. Position two, that's also true is every single holiday that's destroyed, every SNAP beneficiary who went to bed hungry and
Right.
fearful last night.
Right. And that's
Ev
started now. SNAP, the Trump administration is not funding SNAP, even though federal judges have told them they have to.
so then they should be, and I don't yet none of us will believe it until the money's on the card, which means the most vulnerable people in our society who have no stockpile of cash, no
For
way of
40% of which are children,
yeah.
20% are elderly, and 10% are disabled.
Let's just pause on that for a moment, Molly.
Yeah. And
It's
40% FYI are white. Like, I
But
mean,
even that, we know that is and should be irrelevant. Let's pause on
right,
the very human thing you said because
right.
it's profoundly important. Many of our listeners, just like you and I, Molly, are fortunate enough we're doing okay economically. And so we don't think about how will I go to the grocery store next week? What can I afford to buy? What is in the cupboard?
But we do notice, I mean, I certainly notice that my grocery bills are humongous, like crazy high compared to what I mean, and I mean, they're much more. And if we're noticing it, it means it's real everywhere.
Food prices are up about 3% over the
Yeah.
past year. I am profoundly disgusted by anyone who can take the most vulnerable and make them pawns in the political game. Why don't we just have a different kind of shutdown where tax cuts for millionaires get put off for a few weeks? It would, I mean, it's only a weird accident. And well, it's not even a weird accident. It's also the illegality and the approach of the administration. But it's one of the most awful things I've seen the American government do to its own people, and it doesn't need to do it.
Mhm.
There's money there. We know how to spend it. I also want to pan back because Molly, you also are, you're like, oh, what's the effect of the shutdown? You think about next quarter's GDP. We go back to the things that you were talking about, things like we no longer have statistical agencies that are being told it's important to tell the truth. Now, so far they are telling the truth, and I want to remind our listeners of that. But when you fire the head of the BLS for no reason, you're sending them a message. You can stop with that truth stuff. Um, when you have CEOs of major corporations walk into the White House and walk out 10 minutes later with 10% less of their company, when you have the president telling
That's called socialism.
it's called somethingism, when you have the administration ignoring the courts, when you have real questions, when you have ice on the streets, all of this stuff, none of it shows up in this quarter's GDP. But It's more important than anything that shows up in next quarter's GDP. That is not a political statement. That is an economic statement. That is a statement that, on average, the average populist leader over the last 100 years, when you elect them, a decade later has led GDP to be about 15% lower. Let me say that in more human terms. GDP is a fancy word for you elect Trump-like characters, and history shows that a decade later, average income is 15% lower. And he could be worse. When
Right.
you look at these big questions, what makes the United States rich and the country of my birth, which was Papua New Guinea, poor? It's really about state capacity. It's about how we run our economy. It's our political and economic institutions, and they're all being burned down right now. None of that is going to be next quarter's GDP, but everything we know about how economies work tell us this is overwhelmingly the most important thing going on. And you can't see it, but what we will know is that our kids are going to wake up in 10 or 20 years' time, and the opportunities in front of them are going to simply not be there. And it's these unborn opportunities. It's the new ideas, the new industries that just simply never happened. And that's the real cost. And the real
They'll
problem
be
is
in China.
I am trying to figure out how you tell this story. So I need your help because
Mm.
it's not a story, it's economic research. This is
Right.
findings from serious people studying hundreds of years of economic history among every country around the world. And it's not so obvious, but this is folks like you, Molly, do a great job telling it as a political story, but this is an economic story as well. And the American poor will be poorer as a result of our pie being smaller as a result of everything that's going on.
Yeah. Thank you, Elon Musk. So let's talk about where we are right now when it comes to we don't have the data. We have these tariffs. We have this Supreme Court fight, this insane Supreme Court fight about
Crazy.
whether Donald Trump has the power to do everything he's ever wanted to do, period, paragraph. The questions with the Supreme Court, this case, this tariff case, are so big because the courts could side that Trump doesn't have the economic power to do these things and it could not necessarily matter, right? Like they could say he has time to pay it back, or he has this, or he has that. So I would love it if you could explain to us. Don't predict the future, but just lay out what the possible lanes are.
I think what you just said is, can you be an economics professor for about 5 minutes, but I'm
Yeah,
not
and
sure
talk
why.
about the Supreme Court case, the
Yeah,
tariffs in the Supreme Court.
yeah. Okay. So, here's the critical things for people to understand. The Constitution the Constitution gives the power to tax to Congress. Congress has delegated some of those authorities to the White House because Congress understands that Congress is not very nimble. And so for things like national security and so on, you can levy new tariffs through the White House without Congress. There's a process, but that's it. Trump decided he granted himself a new set of powers that had never been used before. All of the tariffs that are on individual countries, on China, on Canada, and actually on every country around the world, 80% of what he's done has been country by country tariffs. Um, there's no legal authority for that. Trump claims he gets one through what's called the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Act is two things are really important about it. One, nowhere does it mention the word tariff or tax.
You're such a stickler for these words and what they
Second, well, good that you're thinking about that because the second thing is stickler for words. It's called the Emergency Powers Act.
yeah.
So I know he wants the powers. I think that means you got to have the emergency.
As Justice Amy brought up, what is the national security reason for, you could say Tokyo, you could say Japan, but then you can't also say,
Tariffs on
you know,
bananas.
right, yeah, and
Um,
Myanmar and Italy, like there, it has,
what about the aggression coming from north of the border? Those Canadians,
yes,
far out, won the World Series, lost the World Series even. Thank
yeah,
goodness.
that's good.
So those are the central issues. I listened to the Supreme Court argument. They actually focused almost exclusively on the first of those, which was, does the Emergency Powers Act give the president the right over tariffs? The government's view was, oh, if tariffs work properly, no one will ever buy anything from abroad, which means we'll collect no revenue. So therefore, the revenue is merely incidental. This is about regulating other countries. The justices fought back and they said, if you want people to not buy from other countries, here's a simpler thing, have an embargo. So it
Right.
was the Boston Tea Party, not the Boston Embargo Party, was
Yeah.
sort of the claim. So in fact, the government made up a new word. It took me a long time to realize they made up a new word. They talked about revenue tariffs versus regulatory tariffs. One of these, there's actually only tariffs. The
Right,
book
right.
behind me on the bookshelf, I might have written it, defines a tariff as a tax on imports. It
Yeah,
is a tax. So the
right.
government wants to claim there's something called a regulatory tariff. It's literally a word they just invented.
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't exist. So that's where most of the argument was. The justices were pretty hostile because when Congress wants to get rid of its taxing powers, it tends to be very, very, very clear, and it didn't even use the word here.
yeah.
But then you still get to the second problem, which is even if it had the power, does Trump have a national emergency? This is where, as an economist, the administration says we have a national emergency because we have a trade, unbalanced trade with specific countries. That's what's called a bilateral trade deficit.
Right,
No economist alive thinks they matter.
right.
Not even do we not think they're an emergency. We don't even think they're interesting.
So even like a Kevin Hassett.
Even Kevin Hassett, if you tied him down and injected him with honesty juice,
Yeah, poor
uh,
Kevin
y
Hassett.
it
What
would take a
can I
lot of honesty juice.
what about Stephen Moore?
So stupid that it hurts.
I mean, I just wanna know who is the dumbest MAGA economist?
I am gonna be really nice. I'm just gonna say I'm glad that there are people. No, I can't even say nice things. I'm just gonna stay out of that. But,
Yeah,
like, a serious point for the audience. What happens when a new administration comes to town is usually they recruit the best and the brightest.
right,
In every administration, not only in my lifetime, in the previous 50 years, you can look at who was the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, who were the nerds and the wonks around the president, and they were the best and brightest of their generation. Many are former Nobel Prize winners, for instance. What we have in the current White House is you can take any ranking of the horsepower of economists, and many exist, by the way. There is no one in the White House who is in America's 10,000 best economists.
right.
That's not a hint of exact, it's a quantitative statement. They've gone dragging through the gutter.
Mhm.
Stupid is as stupid does.
Mhm.
I don't wanna be that guy. I hate
Yeah.
being that guy, but it's not a well-advised White House. Maybe incompetence is part of the strategy.
We're out of time. What are you gonna watch for over the next couple weeks? Economic indicators, what's coming down the pike?
I think the most interesting thing is gonna be this Supreme Court tariff case. It's probably gonna happen quickly according to the legal nerds I talk to. Not tomorrow quickly, but maybe, even before Thanksgiving. That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Happy Thanksgiving, talk about tariffs around the turkey. If, as I expect, the Trump tariffs are ruled illegal, we're gonna move from 8 months of unconstitutional, illegal tariff turmoil that have created all sorts of headaches to a whole new set of tariff turmoil, some of which in the future may even be constitutional, but it'll be this crazy, crazy soap opera in which the president tries to run an economy by pretending he and he alone can move the pieces around the global economy chessboard. So if you think you've seen mayhem, strap in. There's plenty more ahead.
I was told trade wars are good and easy to win. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Molly.